And welcome everyone to our sixth episode of our Partner Ecosystems Improvement Series. Today we will dive into Channel Readiness Part 1, the pre-partner process. We hope this discussion will provide you with the ability to build out your partner program and processes to have a strong channel program. With us today, as always, we have Gilles Esposito, and Gilles has worked in channel partnerships and alliances for 20 plus years. He's worked for distributors, vendors, partners, and brings a 360-degree view to the conversation. And Carlo has spent nearly 3 decades in the channel. We all know he is passionate about partnerships and how companies can optimize the power of their partner ecosystems. So welcome, Gilles and Carlo. So today, channel readiness and the pre-partner process. So I think it would be great to kick off the discussion, and let's really first define what channel readiness is and that pre-partner process and why it's needed before starting any partner recruitment campaign.
As always, I'll let Gilles kick it off. I know
you sure?
Some clear ideas on how to kick this one off, and I'll be glad to chime in as we go along.
All right. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Carlo, for being around as always. Channel readiness. Well, everything is in the title, I guess, right? It's, are you ready to build a channel ecosystem or a partner ecosystem? And we'll focus exclusively today to talk about traditional vendor partner being resellers. Let's start by distributors, if you have the need for that, for a 2-tier channel. But if you have only a need for a 1-tier channel, we'll talk mostly about VARs, resellers, MSPs, MSSPs, those type of or agents, referrals, those type of partners, right? We're not going to talk today, I think, in the elaboration of a readiness program. We're not going to talk about technology alliances and hyperscalers and those type of thing. They usually have their own program they push to you, and their own way of doing business. They're very thorough in the way they approach this. So we'll leave this for another day. So channel readiness is just that, right? It is. Are you ready to tackle an ecosystem of partners and support them in the way they expect, and in a way that's going to make them want to work with you? Are you going to be able to capture some of the mind share you need from them, so that they spend time talking about your solutions to promote them and ultimately sell them? That's it. Carlo, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a great introduction, honestly, Gilles. It's a massive subject, and yes, it's really about setting up all of the core parameters for your partner program. But as always, there's also that very important element of cultural acclimatization in terms of ensuring that within the vendor, within the company, there is a real commitment at all levels of management to kick off with this new initiative. Yeah.
So and you're starting to enumerate the things that are part of the channel readiness. But the one thing I'll add to this is that when you're going to start having your channel managers or your channel team listing meetings with potential partners and that kind of stuff, they're not going to push a sheet in front of you and say, check the boxes, and from the number of boxes you left checked, we'll define whether or not you're channel ready. They're probably not going to be doing this, but they will be expecting a certain amount of things, and we'll go through them over this one and the next webinar as to what the things are. From a DC standpoint, it might be slightly different. Distributors know their job very well, and it is most likely than not that they will push something in front of you and ask you if you have all those type of things at the ready to be able to continue the discussion with them. They don't want to waste their time. Nobody wants to waste their time, but they're far more organized usually than your average partners. Some of the larger partners you may encounter that most vendors are very naturally attracted to work with because there are big names out there and they have tons of customers and blah blah blah. Everybody wants to work with them. Be aware that these partners are going to be more strict as to what they need before they even consider partnering with you, because frankly, as I always say during all the webinars, partners don't need you as a vendor. You need partners, but they don't need you. They have too many options today to do business. They already do business. They weren't waiting for this new vendor to show up to save the day. They're doing just fine. So all this has to be taken into consideration, and it's important. What Carlo was saying is that, I'm not going to start the enumeration. We're going to wait for Aaron to introduce that, but number 0, right, is really to have this buy-in from everybody in the company. So we're positioning ourselves from a vendor standpoint here, of course, but everybody at the vendor level, from the top to the bottom, right, needs to be bought into this initiative of building an ecosystem of partners that is going to scale and increase your sale significantly over time, right? So that's it.
Yeah, needless to say, obviously readiness is everything. It's your reputation is on the line as you approach channel partners, and if you're not ready, you kind of really start the relationship with the wrong foot. And there's so much, and the devil is in the detail, and much of that detail is going to be in the second part of this conversation. Yeah, take it away, Aaron. How would you like to take this conversation right now?
So yeah, well, Gilles and Carlo both mentioned distributors, and whether you're trying to, if you're going to sell directly to your VARs or you're going to use a distributor. So as these new vendors are preparing for channel readiness, what are some considerations that they should keep in mind, deciding if they're going to pursue the distribution relationship or sell directly with, work directly with the resellers?
In my experience, what I see is certainly, well, in both cases, large vendors and small vendors, they will generally have this kind of blended strategy, and the general idea is they'll put the smaller partners through distribution, and they'll handle the relationships with the larger partners directly through managed relationships via PAMs or CAMs. Where you actually draw the line of that threshold and what falls into distribution and what is managed directly is a difficult choice to make, because in my view, in my experience, it's always for economic reasons the line is drawn quite high, and what happens is that in general terms, distribution, yes, does a phenomenal job. They're a machine that is designed for that. But at the same time, forethought has got to be put in place with regards to providing sufficient touch to at least the top layer of the distribution managed partners. And I think that that's one of the most common points of failure in channel execution by vendors, is that they draw that line too high, and they don't really take care that they fund the distributor or other third-party companies like Gorilla or their own organization to actually provide a level of touch, right? That is necessary to keep those relationships going. So I think that's a big flag right there in terms of channel readiness, is understanding what your partner ecosystem looks like, and really coming to a decision as to how you're going to be approaching what categories, how intensely, with what level of touch, by whom, right? What skill do you require to put in place to handle the high touch distribution-led partners, or all of these considerations I think are crucial, and more often than not, that's the biggest point of failure. And what I see is even large companies get that wrong, and end up in a situation whereby the larger partners who they have a strong relationship with deliver the goods, but a lot of the ones that really should be delivering through distribution don't deliver because they didn't line up the ducks correctly. What do you think about that, Gilles? Would you agree?
I think what you just mentioned is part of the. So now we're like back to the last webinar we had on strategy, right? On how you build your strategy around the ecosystem you want to build and all that. I think there's a stigma in channels in general where people think distribution is still some kind of a pick, pack, and ship organization that focuses on volume and that type of thing. I don't think this is true anymore. I think, and I've seen very successful small companies, startups, engaging with distribution right away for many various reasons. But the important part is that this is part of your strategy, right? And there are a number of distributors out there, and I'm not talking about necessarily all the TD SYNNEX and Arrows and Ingrams and the giants. I'm talking there's a slew of smaller distributors that specialize in specific areas, subsets of those large distributors that specializes in the federal space, for example, like EMIX for Arrow and this type of thing that might be extremely relevant to you no matter what size of a vendor you are from the get-go. The defining factor as to whether or not you're going to be working with a distributor or not is not uniform across all the distributors. It's a discussion you need to have with each and every distributor that you may be aware of. It's just one discussion to see what they can bring to the table for you, regardless of what it is that you sell, your size, and so on and so forth, right? It's important to understand that if you have a very successful strategy around distribution, so two-tier channels, it's going to cost, of course, but it's going to alleviate significantly a lot of the things that we are going to enumerate in this channel readiness thing. A lot. And by a lot, I mean really a lot of things, from quote to cash and many other things. What's important to realize as well, what I was mentioning, the stigma about distributors, like people still think about distributor the way they were 20 or 30 years ago, with like big warehouses, integration capabilities and all that. They still do that, right? But you would be thinking, if you're a software vendor, why would I care about these guys, right? Because I don't need anything or whatever. I don't need to integrate anything. I already have a team that does integrations, blah blah blah, this type of thing and all that. They can do way more than that. And most of the bigger ones have incubation team that are dedicated to smaller vendors. And remember, when you deal with them, they already have all the contracts in place with a lot of things, including hundreds, if not thousands, of resellers. So they can vastly accelerate your time to a mature ecosystem, right? So, but that's a discussion. It's not part of channel readiness. What's part of channel readiness? So we named number 0, which is, the buy-in from the company and all that, and everybody moving in the same direction, saying, hey, yes, we want to have a strong partner ecosystem. We want to be a channel-friendly organization or a 100% channel organization, or those type of things. So now everybody needs to be part of that, because you're from the get-go in a smaller company. You're not going to have a full team with all the legal, finance, marketing, and sales organization dedicated to the partner. You're not going to have that. So everybody in the company that touches all those different areas that can impact the relationship between you and a partner, and the efficiency of that relationships, need to be on board. And that needs to come from the top. Again, we talked about that at the beginning. This is one of the number one failure point, is that people think of channel as a, oh, it's cool, it's nice to have this and that, but they don't really focus on it. No, that's number 0. Number 1 is what we just talked about with distribution. You have to have a strategy, right? You have to know what you want to do. Even if it's unrealistic, it's fine. You will tweak it, as we were saying with Carlo last time. A strategy is a live document. It's a live thing that evolves as you encounter things, as you progress, right? And based on the changes in the marketplace, the changes in whatever it is, there's going to be changes. But you cannot go to partners, you cannot go to distributors before you have a strategy, because you'll talk about it with those guys. You'll have to present them, what it is that we want to do, and they will want to know not only your strategy from a partner standpoint, they will want to understand what is your strategy as a company as a whole as well, right? Where is it that you want to go? How do you see yourself developing in the future? What are the products you're going to bring to the table? What markets, what geos, what verticals, all those type of things. You need to have this at the ready. So these is really the absolute, before we touch partner programs and all that, this is the absolute minimal viable baseline you need to have. The buy-in from everybody, and a real intent to make this successful, not just words between two meetings, and a sound strategy for the company and a sound strategy for your channel initiatives. That's it. Carlo, you want to add to that?
I just wanted to add, to question something. In your opinion, you see, in my experience, what I've seen over the years is that it's generally a really good thing for a vendor to do as they are planning, in the case of a startup, or specifically in the case of a startup, to first of all go through the experience of selling direct successfully before actually engaging a channel, because otherwise you don't really know what to expect from your partners, and you don't really necessarily know how to support them better through the process. But somehow, by the same token, I think that it'd be helpful in a sense to have an idea of how of selling through resellers yourself before you actually engage a distributor. Again, for similar reasons, because every company is very, very different. Especially these days, because there's so much differentiation. It's not like before that, it was all variations of network switches. Nowadays, there's the products, the SaaS products, all of the different as a service products, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, can be so particular and unique, and address very unique market personas, etc. That somehow I think that the direct experience on oneself is important before you go through the point of actually going through deciding to go through distribution. What do you think about that?
No, not a whole lot. We're still on distribution, but that's just a small portion of this discussion, right? I'm just want to be conscious about the time. I don't want to make this discussion a discussion around distribution, yes or no, and what is the thing about distribution. Just it's a component that I believe you need to consider from the get-go, whether or not you're going to dive into it right away or you're going to dive into it in the future. My point was just to say distribution can be a tremendous accelerator to an effort, even from a startup perspective. And I've seen a number of startups that have started their initiatives. They're going through distributor that specializes in startups. For example, I know a very large one in Europe. I know a few of them in the US that are not the size of the one we mentioned earlier, but that are really good at that, right? At spreading the word and all that. Which doesn't mean, by the way, a strategy is not, you mentioned that, a strategy is not necessarily one tier or two tier of a strategy, right? From a channel's perspective. You can have partners that are going to go through Disty, and you can retain partner DVARs that you're going to be managing directly. So DVAR is an old term for direct VARs. That vendors would manage directly through their channel team. But that doesn't mean that the partners that are going to be touched by a distributor, you don't get to touch them as well, right? So I don't want to start diving into this. It's complex. My only point is to say this should have been, by the time you're looking at channel readiness and start listing all the things you need to have before you engage with partners, including distributors, you should have a certain amount of things and all that. This portion as to whether or not you're going to be dealing with Disty or if you're going to go direct with all your partners is something you need to have thought before that time, right? Those are discussions you need to have had before, and these are things you need to have had in place before you start touching other partners and that kind of stuff. That will either be, if you have a distributor, they will either go through this Disty or they will go direct to you, right? Because most likely than not, you're not going to have all the disties that you need to have to cover all the partners. At a later time, you may want to start pushing some of the DVARs that you have, the partners that you have. You may want to start pushing them towards some of the disties if you have a distie strategy, if you have a distie mechanism in place. But that's another discussion, and maybe I think we'll need to do one specific on distie to talk about that. One webinar specific on distie to dive a little bit deeper in that subject because it's complex, it's vast. But again, it's also the perception of it is very dusty. So we need to correct a few things there. So we talked about the buy-in, right? So today we're talking about the baseline elements, right? Really, what you need to start and all that. Just so everybody on the audience knows, there's a list that we've compiled that has about 25 elements in it, a little bit more than 25 elements, which are, if you have those 25 elements and they're solid, and you start recruiting partners and you come with that and you can demonstrate you have all the things that compose those 25 different topics, you will be extremely channel ready, providing you can execute on those things, right, as well, right? Today, we're not going to cover the 25, right? It's my understanding, Aaron. We're just going to cover the baseline. So I give the elements, right? The buy-in and the strategy, which you need to have, because those are discussion that some of the buyers are going to want to talk about with you. Some of the SSI, some of the SSPs, MSSPs and MSPs, and SIs and GSIs, and all those kind of people. Some of them will want to understand that kind of stuff, and more often than not, that will be part of your pitch when you're in front of them and saying, this is where we're at, this is where we're going in the future with our company, and this is where we want to go in the future with our partner ecosystem. Do you fit in there? Blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And then, hopefully come to an agreement and get everybody aligned, right? So these two elements, internal buyout, strategy, that's your absolute baseline. Then, shall we continue with what composes the baseline, right? So, yes or no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Carlo, you're muted, I think. And the next thing that's going to happen is the goal of this is to scale your sales through third parties, right? That are going to be doing taking care of the sales cycle for you, hopefully, or with you, preferably with you. But we'll talk about that when we enumerate all the things you need for that to happen, for the co-selling models to happen and all that. What's next for me, the most important thing is two elements that have nothing to do with you and nothing to do with the partners. It's the market. So a lot of time I've seen this happening through direct experience. So working with them, joining a company to build a partner ecosystem with them, and realizing that they were in shadow mode, then they launched their pure startup. They're in their first or second year of operation, and they still have no idea what the TAM is for their product. They have absolutely no freaking idea if this is gonna, target only the Fortune 500 of the world, or if it's going to target every company. And when I say no ID, it's not true. They have roughly some IDs because they've tested this with friends and talked about it with people they know and that kind of stuff. But they're incapable of putting numbers, like precise numbers, in front of their partners. And partners are extremely demanding of this information. Because if you have a strategy to have in North America 500 resellers, or let's say 100 resellers, right, for a TAM that is $1 million, nobody's going to sign, right? Even $10 million, nobody's going to sign, because they just divide the second number by the first one. They look at it and they go like, we're not going to waste our time for this amount of money, right? There's nothing to be made out of this, right? They need to know what the TAM is. And the more precise your TAM, your total available market is, the better, right? And not only you need to have a pretty good idea of what your market looks like, You need to provide information as to whether or not this market is ready to adopt the proposed solutions you have or the services you have, right? So this concept of adoption curve that if you're not familiar with, you can find on websites like Gartner and that kind of stuff, or you can just Google adoption curve, right? And you'll find a very nice graphic that shows, and you need to be able to clearly position yourself with supported information that says, yeah, this is in demand right now, or it's going to be in demand very soon. It's going to be at maturity here and there within this amount of time, which is usually a good thing to be ahead of the curve, but not too much, right? Because that gives time for your partners to become proficient and fluent in pitching it and that kind of stuff when the product is going to be very mature, or the demand for the product is going to be very mature, right? The adoption is going to be at peak level. Then they're going to be able to sell your stuff like it's little pieces of cookies and breads, and it's going to be easy. You need to have this concept of time and market readiness to absorb the product, the adoption curve. You need to have this really ready and be able to talk to it. And more than that, it'd be very good if that's bonus feature, right? That you can point to credible third-party validation of that, right? So your Forrester, IDG, Gartner, and all those guys, right? It's important to, if you just go and say our time is $2 billion worldwide, people are going to ask you, where'd you get that info, right? And I certainly would be the first one to do that and say, hey, that's great. That's a good market. You want, 200 VARs on the planet for a $2 billion time. That's great. That's enough money for everybody. We're not going to be overlapping. We're not going to fight for crumbs. It's a good market to be in, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a big time. It doesn't matter, because most of your partner will look at your product as a way of generating revenue and all that, but there's other benefits to a set of product and solution, such as what other adjacent sales from their portfolio or their bench, if they have a bench, right? What other sales can your solution trigger, right? Or sometimes it's just as simple as, can these easy short sales cycle solution get us into an account where we're not in already? That's a foot in. They don't care about the money here. They care about being within an account that they were not in before. So for them, it's a way in, and once they're in, they can sell the rest of the stuff they have in their portfolio. So you don't have to have the biggest time of the world. It doesn't matter. What matters is that your market. That creates a lot of confidence from a partner perspective, especially if the information you provide is validated by renowned third parties like the ones I mentioned, Forrester, Gartner, IDG, all these guys, right? So I'm going to pause here. Carlo, do you want to add something to this?
No, I'm following your line of thought, and I think it's excellent. And I think absolutely, the serviceable, addressable market is something that you got to know, and you got to be precise about it, because what I've noticed is, in relation to that particular topic, sometimes folks will say, let's say that there's the vendor has a specific solution within the world of cybersecurity. They'll quote the total cybersecurity market, but that's not the right thing to go to market with. The resellers, the channel will not appreciate that all that much. So you really want to be very specific about the serviceable, addressable market for that particular type of technology.
And it's not easy, right? It's a complex exercise. Sometimes it's a very costly exercise to find what the time is, because there are companies that specialize in this, and those services are not cheap. So sometimes it's very hard. So you have to be honest first and foremost, but it's really an area where you want to be proficient at some point, right? And preferably before you recruit, you need to know or have a fairly good idea, even if you don't have third-party validation of your numbers. You want to have a fairly good and sound idea as to what your time looks like, right? What market are your partners going to tackle, right? Is it minute? Is it gigantic? If it's minute, you're going to develop, obviously, a pitching strategy around you partnering with them that is not going to be around the size of the market. It's going to be around other things like the things I mentioned previously. But it's important because it gives them confidence that you know what you're doing, and you know your market, and you know your thing, right? And if you go out there with a great idea and you have no idea of whether or not I've seen this, and Carlo and I know that because you as well, Aaron, because we're working together on this particular first project we worked on, right?
Yep.
Where we had a team of about 25-ish people, and they were all super technically savvy and created a product that was super good on the paper, very, very sweet, very, very good for software developers. And when I joined to start building and leverage Guerrilla services to start building the thing, we realized they had no idea of the maturity level of that product in terms of adoption, and even much less about what the time looked like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were very optimistic. So the time was not that much lower than what we thought, but it wasn't accurate from the get-go, and that caused us trouble at the beginning because some of the partners we were approaching were pros of that space, and when we started delivering those numbers we thought were correct, they corrected us, and in correcting us they lost confidence in our ability to be expert in our market. Despite the fact the solution was absolutely stellar, they were like, you guys don't really know what you're doing, right? And that's not good. That's not good at all. So
yeah. But the program.
Move on to the next one, or
yes, yeah.
So from now you have a company that is bought in. You know, you have a vendor that is bought in, from the CEO all the way down to anybody that has an impact on the success of the channel. They understand the importance of that. That's great, right? You have a sound strategy for your company. You have a sound strategy for your partner ecosystem approach. And you know the market, right? You know what the market is capable of absorbing, how much, where, if you can go into specifics as which vertical is more, you know, like, oh, healthcare is going to be great for this, but financial services, not so much, and so on and so forth. If you have an idea of that as well, that's part of the thing we just discussed, the TAM. It's great to have this level of information as well. This is very useful for partners. As you would see, some of your partners are very, for example, efficient in some specific verticals versus others and that kind of stuff. So that will help you target some of them and pitch differently from one to another, depending on the specifics of the market, right? So you have all this in place. Now you're going to need to tackle the next layer of thing, which so there's two other things that are the baseline. One is the processes and the ways of doing things, right? That's one of them. And the other one is the actual partner program, right? And when I say partner program, I'm not referring to a document nice with cool images and super nice graphics and stuff like this. I'm talking about what's in it, right? So I don't know which one you want to tackle first. You say we should tackle the partner program first or the processes first? They come together, right? I mean, it's
yeah, they really do. And I was thinking about the previous project that you mentioned, and so I'd like to start with the processes there, and that's where we started with that program was processes, and then we developed the partner program and had an amazing deck to go with it. So
okay. So first and foremost, from observation of how people operate or companies have operated, at least what I've seen, which is a very small fraction of the entire world of companies that have partner programs and this type of thing, or initiative to build partner ecosystems. Most everybody focus on the normal situations, right? And the normal situation, when you talk about processes and all that, is going to be mostly everything that is normal from a quote to cash operation. How do we provide a quote to a partner, right? What does it look like when we provide a quote to a partner, right? And everything that goes in between, all the way to how do we get a PO from them, and how do we do a sales order and this kind of thing, and blah, 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 right? So you have terms and conditions that explain some of the things. That's fine, right? So that's the quote to cash thing. everybody has a process to that. In this case, you need to have a process that is specific to the channel because things are different, right? But that's kind of an easy one that you're going to need to think about. All the things we're mentioning, by the way, when you're going to have a meeting to a partner, if they ask you, can you have a document that shows the process map and all that? So one of the things I've done is I've used tools like Lucid or others to help me map the process of every process, right? And as simple as that, but like in a very functional way. For example, the quote to cash operation, and we've done that together, Aaron. So you've seen this before, right? Where I say, okay, well, so partner as a potential customer for my solution, right? What do they do next, right? So create a box and create an arrow that goes from the first one to the second one and say, send email to, and then you put the email address where they send it, quotes at companyabc.com, requesting a quote and all that, or that kind of stuff, right? For whatever. So what information do they need to provide for us, the vendors, to be able to provide them with a quote and all that? And so it looks very simple when you think about it, but there's quite a bit of information to have, right? If you have a document like this that references on a single page, not only the process, but all the element they need to provide and what it is and all that, you save time, you become easy to deal with, which is one of the three pillars of a successful ecosystem. And they're happy because suddenly they don't have to call you and say, hey, what do you need for me to get a quote from you and that kind of stuff. You have the turnaround time, those type of things. So they know all the variables, all the element they need to provide for you to be able to get that, and so on and so forth for every different steps that you have. Lucid is not very expensive. It's if I can use it, anybody else can use it. So it's very easy to build a process map, very simple. If anybody here wants anything, I can help you with, because I have a ton of them to show you. Gorilla, I can provide a ton of them as well. But the point is to say, you need to document all the stuff we're talking about today and during the next section. You need to document that, right? And to be able to use it as a leave behind, or if you have a portal, to put it behind the portal so that when people look for it, how do I get a quote from company XYZ? They're capable of finding it right away without having to track people and that kind of stuff. So going back to what you need for the baseline of channel readiness, you have to have all the processes that can be encountered in a relationship between you, the vendor, and them, the partners, to be documented and to be somewhere and to be explained clearly, right? And you need also to be open to partners telling you that's not how we do things, right? We have our own quote form, we have our own things, we have our, that's fine. You need to be ready for that, because you're going to have quite a bit of those discussions, especially at the beginning. Then when you become Microsoft, you can tell everybody to just go lay an egg, and because you have 40,000 partners, you're not going to do exception. Everybody's going to use the same model, and at this point, it becomes your model, not their model. And everybody will understand that, unless you present it the way I just said. But otherwise, everybody will understand that, because you cannot work every partner with a different approach, a different angle, a different process when you have 40,000 of them. But we're not there yet, so we're going to skip on that. But the thing I was saying at the beginning is, like, for implementation, support, quote to cash, some marketing operations, and like requesting funds and those type of things. These are really the normal things that happen when everything is rose and nice and happy. What companies usually forget to do is to prepare to put in place a set of processes for everything that is an exception. So by exception, I usually mean things like channel conflicts, special pricing requests, credit line issues, export issues, escalations, all those type of things, right? You need to think about, how is this going to work, right? If this is going to be, it shows when you're going to talk to a partner and present them with, all those things that you have at the ready for them. It shows that you know what you're doing, because you know the things are going to happen. Hopefully not every day, but you have a method for that. You are ready to tackle those things when they will occur, right? As simple as that. So this is for the 50,000 feet high, why you need processes in place, but not only the normal processes, also the exception things, because this is the thing that usually are going to cause the most difficult times for your company, the biggest heartaches and headaches and so on and so forth. And the faster you can deal with those conflicts and other exceptions and that kind of stuff, the better, right? And if you have a process, if you don't have a process in place, one arises today and you treat it one way, and another one arises a month later and you forgot how you treated it the first time and you treat it a different way the next time and all that, you kind of look like a clown, right? Like you don't know what you're doing. So being fair, we have a saying in channels, which usually is to say we treat everybody fairly, but not equally. Of course, the one that are generating the most revenue for you, that are giving you the most mind share and all that, this is the equally part. You're going to spend more time with them, do more things with them and all that. But the fair part is extremely important, that you have a set of rules by which everybody abide and which are the same for everybody. It's important. And that is becoming extremely important when you have conflicts, right?
Yep.
Where you need to treat. So all these processes, the easy one and the tough ones, you need to have them documented, and you need at least to pass the message to your prospective partners that you're ready to tackle any scenario. Right. So that's it from a high level for other processes.
Great.
Carlo?
So let's. Oh.
No, I'm. You're making it easy for me, Jill, and I'm loving it. I'm the passenger today, and I love it. In terms of processes, one thing that interests me, and maybe we'll talk about it more in the next session, is the workflows and processes around co-selling and co-marketing motions. Is that something that we should address at the next session?
It's on the list. It's next sessions. Yeah, it's so complex. You need to have. Well, if you look at, I'll make a little parenthesis here because I don't want to dive in this, but and when we'll talk about marketing, and we'll have sessions on co-selling and co-marketing, right? Specifically dedicated to that. Today we're just talking about channel readiness, right? And we'll have specific session for that because it's a big world. There's a lot of things to talk about here. So very good point, Carlo. And you know, equally, just like everything else, we're going to be enumerating today and next month. Sorry. When you have this, the more stuff you have documented, the more you show potential partners that you know how to address this. You have a method for that, right? The more they're going to be confident that working with you is going to be easy, right? That it's not going to be every time we bring something to the table, you're going to need to have 17 meetings before a decision is made. And no, it's already canned. It's already, we know exactly what it is and all that. Yes, of course, there will be things you haven't encompassed from the get-go and things that will be completely new at some point in the development of your ecosystem. Fine. Right. But the less of these, the better, right?
Yep.
It shows confidence. You know what partners are looking for, how they operate, and that you know what you're doing, right? Pretty much in this environment. Yep. So then we move on to, shall we move on to the partner program, right?
Let's move on to the program. Absolutely.
Carlo, you want to start talking about this, or you want me to keep babbling?
Keep talking. I'm not sure which way you want to steer the conversation.
Well, I want to stay super high level on the channel program,
yeah.
Right? So for me, the channel program is just, and just is not a diminutive here, right? It's an important part that encompasses a lot of the elements we've talked about, but it's pretty much your message to the channel community, to the partner community, to say, this is how we think, this is how we would like to go and deal with you. And pretty much the components of your channel, of your partner programs should be, you know, it's kind of a contract pretty much where you say, this is what we bring to the table. This is how we think it's going to benefit you, right? And more than think, this is how we believe it's going to benefit you. This is our market. We talked about having a good understanding of the market. And we're going to bring this to the table. And in return, we would expect you to bring that to the table, right? And that part is important because within that part, some elements are going to be soft, but it's still good to list them. And some elements are going to be very hard-coded, hardcore, right? Like behavioral element on the marketplace, and versus with other partners as well, within a community of things, right? You need to have rules in place and all that, and you're going to enumerate some of those rules, if not all of them, on how you expect your partner to behave and to act and what you expect from them. And if you have different tiers of expectation, this is where you're going to have your traditional, silver, gold, plat, type of partners. So you're going to give a menu pretty much to the partner saying, hey, if you want to do that much, you're going to be, if you do that, and that, you're qualified for silver partnerships. And if you're going to do, whatever. I'm not a super big fan necessarily of partner tiers at the beginning, especially of a company and all that. But I do understand that at some point it can have some element of motivation to partners. I think the biggest motivation is what they get out of it from a fiduciary perspective, and the ability that your product or set of solutions provide for them to open doors and sell other things that they have on their line card, right? But sometimes tiers do make sense. So the tiering of a partner program is something you need to think about ahead of time, right, in your strategy and all that, and that kind of stuff. I'm going to say the same thing before I go to the next thing. What's really important, what makes sense for the partners to understand, because that's an overwhelming, permanent, constant, top of mind concern that they have, is the opportunity registration, right? Partners can spend a lot of time trying to get you a new customers and all that. They want to be protected for those efforts, right? It's important for them to understand what your deal registration or opportunity registration, call it whatever you want, program looks like. And they need to be very confident that it's solid and that it protects against two things. Their number one competition, which is you with your direct sales team. So you need to have clear rules of engagements here that define, who owns what in terms of customer, even if you're in a co-sell motion. And I would say, especially if you're a co-sell motion. And the other type of competitors that they have is, of course, the other partners, right, that are part of your partner ecosystem. So they need to be protected from those two potential competitors that they have. And you need to be able to show that very, very clearly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What do you think about when we
Why
talk?
Is everybody frozen?
Oh. No, we talk about deal registration is absolutely crucial. Having a clear path to that from the very beginning is fundamental. And the same, I would say, also, of course, lead registration. Sometimes when vendors go to market, they don't really think about the lead registration part. But I would say that's also quite important. And it kind of goes also hand in hand with the idea of incentives. What is your view on that, Gilles? Is that something that should come into one's planning in these earlier stages, like channel incentives?
So personally, when I talk about incentives and this type of thing, I usually don't record this. Beside the general way to say that depending on the tier or depending on what we do, or if you register your stuff, you have an extra 5%, blah blah blah, this type of thing, because those are variable that may change over time. So I usually, maybe when I design a partner program or the document that supports a partner program, I'm going to list those things and say, we do have that. We do have a set of incentives for registering leads, for doing this, for taking certifications and this type of thing and all that. Some of them are obvious because they allow you to move from one tier of partnerships to another. Some of them not. Some of them are, but a lot of your incentives are going to be point in time incentives, and there's going to be a lot of variables depending on what it is that you want the incentive to trigger in terms of behavior. So I talk about it very generally in a partner program. But in the way I run an ecosystem, usually I have the people in my team, the channel managers and all that, the people in partner marketing and all that, make sure they communicate the incentives and the nature of the incentives very regularly, not when they come out, before they come out. So it gives partner the time to prepare for this type of thing and all that. But that, I think, Carla, is something we'll talk more in depth when we talk about the incentives in the webinar series, right? And marketing. For the sake of the time, because we have 10 minutes left, for me, it's important that you have a partner program in place that shows the element that we talked about, what we bring, what we expect you to bring, the different tiers, this type of thing. This is how we operate. Maybe some differentiator you have, and differentiator not on your product side, but differentiator on how you tackle the channel and all that. Put some teasers in those, like the co-selling, the co-marketing stuff, a lot of incentives, a lot of events, blah 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 blah, this type of thing, right? But big focus on the opportunity registration or the deal protection program that you have in place for your partners. That is absolutely critical. We can have a session specific to different types of partners, and you can look at. So I read the one from RSA, former RSA, not too long ago, because it was very thick, and there's dozens of pages where they encompass absolutely everything and all that. For a company that size, makes sense to have a single repository document where you have everything, right? And they expect their partners to really read it. For most vendors, it's not necessary to try to encompass everything and re-edit or rewrite your partner program every time you have a comma that changed position or something you add or something you remove, which is what those guys are doing. But these big vendors have gigantic teams that can be dedicated to doing this day in, day out. You don't. So make it a simple document, right? But that encompasses what the partners are sensitive with, right? Or it's so what I mentioned, right? The opportunity registration program, the requirements, the soft one, the hard ones, and your commitments, right? Those type of thing. Usually that's enough, because the rest you will have anyway, and it will be either handed to the partner as an onboarding package, part of your onboarding program, or it will be accessible if you have a portal for them. When they sign in, they will be able to have all the assets and all the things and all that, and all the details about what Carla was talking about, including incentives and other things and all that. If you have incentives that are permanent, that you think are going to last throughout the life of your program and that kind of stuff, then yes, you can absolutely put it there. Otherwise, you're going to create yourself as a vendor a lot of work to update your stuff regularly, right? So I would leave it as simple as possible. But more important, the thing I wanted to say, what I've said to every single webinar we've had so far, the number one mistake that every vendor does, they hire, they have a channel chief or a VP of channels and whatever, and then the VP of channels build a channel management team and people in channel marketing and whatnot, right? You do all that, and they launch their stuff, they create their stuff and all that, and then they launch it. And they do that 90+% of the time. It's probably much higher than that, but 90+% of the time, from what I've observed and the companies I've consulted with, I've always asked the question, when you created your partner program, how many partners do you talk with before you created your partner program, to ask them, what do you want to see in a partner program, right? What is important to you as an opener, to have a good gauge of, are you going to be dealing with this company or not, right? And if you don't do that, and you work in your bubble as the vendor with only people from the vendor community, and of course, some of your people maybe in your team have been working at different vendors, or they've been working at partners and this type of thing, so they have some of that information. But take the time to go talk to your partners or prospective partners, right? And say, hey, here's the goal. We're trying to put this in place, right? Because we have a firm intent to have a very good partner program, a very good channel ecosystem. We want to be 100% channel company within the next 10 years, something like that. What makes you resonate, right? when you see a vendor, what is very appealing to you and what is absolutely not appealing to you, right? And can you give me example without mentioning any other vendors or whatever? I don't need to see their programs. I can just tell me the things that are like impacting you the most, positively or negatively. Do that with 10 of them, 5 of them, right? And you'll start having very good ideas as to how you need to craft your partner program, coming from the people that you're trying to sell, rather than coming from yourself, which, it might be very good, but it's going to be a shot in the dark most of the time. So
yeah,
that's the only thing I would add to that.
That sounds like the stuff of like a partner advisory council. Thought, right from the very beginning, that's the first steps of it, which I think is a great idea, Joel.
I agree,
yeah.
And I think you hit on something.
You see, partner advisory council usually being established by a company of what size, Carl? Right?
Yeah.
Big ones. Usually they have that kind of stuff. This needs to change. I mean, that's a good thing, and we have a subject on that late in the series, probably in a couple of years from now or something on that. But always ping your partners for every time you want to do something. You want to do a spiff, go talk to them first, right? You want to do anything, go ask them, right? The one that are, and once you have your Pareto rule established with your partners, and you'll have 20% of your partners doing 80% of your revenue, make sure you ask the 20%, right? Yeah. But also ask the 80%, because maybe you'll find out why they're not that big of a producer. Yeah. But some, like, use them. It's a partnership, right? It's not an extension of your sales force. It's a partnership, and they have a lot of information, way more than you do, to bring you. And in aggregate, they have a lot more information, not only on your product program and all that, but also on your product, on your strategy, on many, many different things. They'll be able to prevent you from doing big, design mistakes or other things. But for that, you need to talk to them. If you only ask them at the end of the quarter, what do you have for me? That's not going to go very far.
Yep.
So you can, test them and have them build your own partner program if you want. I've done this so many times. And
yeah.
So that's it for me.
Outstanding.
Great stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill, for all these insights.
Absolutely. I think you hit on something that we see a lot, is partners really focusing on the product and not the program, and the value to the partners of the program as they go in and design the program. And that's something that we've worked with a lot of vendors on over the years. So, all right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It was a very interesting topic and a great discussion. So this recording will be available on our website at gorillaict.com under our events tab. Connect and follow us on LinkedIn as well. So join us. As we mentioned, May will be part 2 of our channel readiness discussion. We're going to cover the assets you need to have at the ready when you will start recruiting new partners to your ecosystem. So really looking forward to that one.
Forward to.
Yeah, that's going to be great. So we'll do a deeper dive next month in May. So we hope to see everybody there.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.